Alright, so let's work in the interface section of the CS character implementation file. And what we're going to do is, I'm going to cheat my way through this, is just paste in a bunch of bool variables, which will help us obviously organize those properties that we just added. So I'm just keeping with the same names as the ones we put in. Use front view frames, use resting frames, and so on, all the way down here to our use back attack frames. And while we're up here, let's go ahead and set up some SKActions, and I'll go ahead and just type in the first one, SKAction, and this will be walk front action. Alright, now let's look at the documentation here. An SKAction object is an action that is executed by a node in the scene. Actions are most often used to change the structure and content of the node to which they are attached, but it can also make other changes to the scene. Blah, blah, blah. All right, so point is, we are going to hold on to these actions right here. And anytime we need them, we will obviously just execute them on the particular node. In this case, our node is just going to be the character here. All right, I was about to say self, but it actually is going to be the character, because remember, our SK sprite node is what is depicting the image of the character, and these SKActions are going to get applied to that, and they're going to change the texture. Those are going to be our animated frames, and they will actually just mostly do that. So we're gonna hold on to each one of these actions, and I've got a few more to paste in here, so let's do it. And I've got walk back action, walk side action, repeat rest. This is going to be one that just repeats through the resting frames. The side attack action, front attack action, and the back attack action. Alright, and another reason that we're kind of declaring these out here, under the hood, retaining them, is so that when we're moving around the scene, we'll be able to just immediately run these actions again without having to go and set them back up. Alright, so once they're set up, they should stick around for the life of the app, and in case they were to get dumped out, we'll plan against that. Okay, so what we need to do now is go and let's come into our create with dictionary statement and figure out a good place to add in our textures. Let's do that. Sorry, there it is. Let's do it after our speed. Let's put in here a big note that just says textures, so we know what's going on here. And while we're at it, since this does apply to our textures, we need to put in our FPS, or our frames per second variable. And I guess I forgot to put that up at the top, didn't I? This will be a unsigned car, because we're never going to go higher than 255 with this, and we never want it to be anything other than at least some positive number. But just remember that the range is 0 to 255, but really you want this to be 1 to 60. Alright, so now I'm going to speed things along by just pasting these into. We've got our FPS equals the object FPS, that's an integer value, and then all the rest of these are going to be bool values. So use backframe is going to equal that same property in the list, and so on for all of those. Alright, now once we've established the yes or no values for each one of these, we're going to have to put in if statements. So we're going to say if use resting frames equals yes, then in that case we're going to need to write self set up rest, and we get to do that same thing for every single one of these particular options. And again, I'm just going to run through here as quick as possible by pasting these in. Alright, so we've now got a lot of errors, but that's because every one of these methods is of course missing at the moment. But use side view frames, use back view, and so on. Each one of these is called a similarly named method. Set up walk back, front, side attack, and and by setup, I do just mean set up. We're going to basically just run through what needs to go through, what needs to happen with assigning textures to those, and then apply them to our SKAction. We're not actually going to run the action at this time, so they are just setting those up. Alright, so now let's pick out a good place to set up all those textures, and you'll do it right over here. Since we've already got a method name set up over there. Let's do it after our debug path, though, just so that stays with the physics stuff. And you guessed it, I'm going to paste this on in here just to save us a little bit of time. So we've got setup rest, setup walk front, setup walk back, setup walk side, setup side attack frames, set up back attack frames, and set up front attack frames. And you can see I put pragma marks in here, so now we can just kind of jump back and forth. All right, enough cutting and pasting. It's about time I actually wrote some code. So let's go over here and start at the top. We're gonna write SK texture atlas and give this name of atlas is going to equal SK texture atlas named. We're going to pull this name out of the dictionary, character data, object for key, and let me give us a little bit more space. This was named resting atlas file. Okay. Next up, NS array. This will be our, let's just call it array. By the way, I'm trying to make these names kind of a little vague. When I originally wrote the code for this, I had an array named resting array, but I can copy all the same code into the other methods with just a few changes, so it doesn't make much sense to give very specific variable names. Alright, so NS array, this is going to be equal array with array, and this is now going to be our character data, object for key, and that's going to be our resting frames. And let's just review that real fast. So here are here's our resting atlas file, right? Just named still, and then our resting frames. And all this is doing, this array right here, is just being used to tell the compiler what are the actual frame names or what are the image file names inside of the atlas. All right, so that's really just their only connection. And so over here in our code, we need the atlas file name, and we just need to know what frames we're going to be using, really. No more complicated than that. All right, now NS mutable array, and this is going to be called atlas textures, and this time I know I definitely need to use the mutable one because I'm going to be adding an object into the array. At least I'm pretty sure I have to use the mutable one. It's the one that's changeable. If you're curious about that, you can always go over here and an NS mutable array class declares the program interface a modifiable array. That's what I was looking for. The class adds insertion and deletion operations to the basic array handling behavior inherited from NS array. All right. So there you have it. Okay, and we're going to put in here array with capacity, and you can basically set up an array that only has a capacity of a certain amount, and we know that certain amount because we've got our array that we just created over here, and we know the count of that just by writing count, so how many objects are in there. And next up, speaking of counts, let's make a little integer named count. This could even be an unsigned car, one of our super small integers. We'll just call this count equals 0. Alright, and I'm just going to write over here for ID object in array. So that just means we're going to run a for statement or iterate through as many times as there are objects in that array. Alright, so ID is just our little anonymous object type. And here we're going to say SK texture. We're going to be basically making textures out of the Atlas files. So we're going to say SK texture. This will just be just call this texture over here, and then we're going to write Atlas texture named, and then we're going to say array object at index, and then we'll just put back our count in there. Okay, so the first time this runs, count equals 0, correct? And that will find the first object in our array. All right, so our array of resting frames. Grab the first one in there, and the second time this runs, well, count has got to equal something different, so we'll make count the ++. That'll just increment it up 1 each time this for statement runs through. And then finally what we need to do is put in here Atlas textures add object rest. Oh, I'm sorry, just texture. See, it's about to put the word rest in there. No. All right, so now our let's see, yeah, our mutable array of Atlas textures has this SK texture added to it. All right, so in the end we're going to have a NS mutable array, this Atlas textures, which contains object types of SK texture, and each one of those textures has its name defined from our resting frames. All right, so it's kind of a lot of code to set that up, but I mean, it's not too overwhelming. All right, finally, once we've done all that, we're going to say SKAction, and this will be called Atlas animation. Just a name of my choosing, though. Doesn't necessarily have to be called that. SKAction, and then we're going to say animate with textures, and then we need to give it an array. All right, so that's where we fill in our Atlas textures, and then our time per frame is going to be 1.0 divided by our FPS that we've already established earlier. So if that was 60 there, 1.0 divided by 60 is a pretty quick frame rate, right? But this will get slower depending on what FPS is. So if this was just 1 divided by 1, that equals 1, right? and that would just be 1 frame per second. Okay, so that's why we do that little bit of a division, and then for the resting animation, for this particular one, I'm going to put in here another action, which is just going to be to wait. All right, so it doesn't look like this guy's out of breath, just quickly breathing up and down. If we were to just wait for 0.5 seconds, half a second between running these animations, I think it'll look a little bit better. So SKAction now, we'll put in here sequence equals SKAction sequence, and we do this little @ symbol. You do your opening and closing bracket, and it's asking for the objects inside of here, and we're going to put in here Atlas animation, comma separated by wait, and unlike Cocos 2D, you don't have to put in here nil. Convenient. And then close that off, and finally we're going to say repeat rest. All right, remember that was that SKAction that we defined up in the interface part. So this is the only one that's going to be kind of held onto, or not garbage collected over time. At least it shouldn't, I don't think. And repeat action forever, and then we're just going to put in here our sequence. Okay. So all these other little items kind of get packaged up into our one SKAction here. And I suppose we should probably test this out before we begin copying and pasting everything over here. Well, you know what? That's actually really easy to do. We can just put in here a line that says character run action repeat rest. And let's give it a shot. We won't do it on my iPad. Do it on the simulator. And a lot of code in there, so hopefully this runs right away. It could be a typo, you never know. And drum roll. Crash. Hey, look at that. They're all doing it. It's just kind of bopping up and down, aren't they? Let's see these guys a little bit bigger. Can we squeeze them in here? Yeah. I like it. All right, cool. So at least we know that's running. So let's stop this. And we'll take that out. All right, let's cut and paste. So I'm going to copy, or not cut, copy and paste. And as I was saying before, we don't need the weight option in this one. So let's go over here and just take that out. And then our walk front action is just going to equal our atlas animation. So we don't need that sequence in there either. We're going to keep in that it's a repeat action forever, basically until you stop walking. And then let's just go ahead and put in our various names for each one of these. So walk front frames. And everything else should stay exactly the same. So I told you we'd speed things up a little bit. So this is going to be our walk back action. And this will be our walk back atlas file. Walk back frames. Same deal. Okay. Now for the attack frames, for the most part, this is pretty similar. We are just going to basically throw in a few Boolean variable, or just one Boolean variable, one if statement, to check to see if we are actually using the side view frames, because, or if we're using the side view, front view, back view, in which case what we'll do is we'll return to that frame sequence. Otherwise, we will not worry about returning to it. So let's start with the front ones. So scoot back over here to the top, steal out what we can. I guess I kind of have these written out of order, don't I? All right, so this will be our front attack atlas file. This will be our front attack frames. And we get all the way down on here, and this will be front attack action. And that's where our if statement's going to go in. So we're going to say if use front view frames equals yes, and probably if you're doing a front animation or attack animation, you are going to do that, but just want to plan for all possibilities. So then take this. Actually, you know what? We're going to change this a little bit. It's going to be front action equals SKAction repeat action, and there's our atlas animation. And then your count, I'm gonna set this to 1, and then I'll let you guys decide if you want it to repeat more than one time. So at least you have that option in there. Sometimes like a quick double attack looks even cooler than just like a simple front attack. All right, so now within here we're going to put SKAction return to walking, and this will be SKAction perform selector. Unfortunately, there's going to be a selector that we haven't actually set up yet. So it's going to be called run walk front textures, and that's one of the actual calls that we use to run these actions. And then we'll say front attack action equals, and now it's going to be a SKAction sequence. So sequence, put in that @ symbol, Here's where we put in Atlas animation and then return to walking. And if we try to run this right now, we would have an error because obviously this run walk front textures doesn't exist, but it is set up and ready to go, and that's how we're gonna do the rest of these as well. So let's go ahead and just copy all this, and we'll put it into our side frames now. And of course this is now going to be use side view frames. This becomes our side attack action, and everything else is going to be the same except for this. Run, walk, side, textures. And what's the error we're getting here? Oh, okay. It's funny that I didn't get that same error down here. Oh, no, I did. It finally showed up, I guess. All right. Ready to go, just not testable at the moment. And here we go. Back attack. I should just be copying and pasting the word side, but just being sure I get these instance or these property list names correct. All right, and back attack action, and then run, walk, back, textures. Okay, and I think that about does it for setting up every single one of these. We of course now have the unenviable task of putting in now similar methods for each one of these to actually run. And you know what? I think this video is running a bit long, so let's go and we'll just do that in the next video. And you'll have to live with these little warnings until then.